Well, there's new debate around congressional term limits and the age of America's politicians. After 81-year-old Congresswoman, she was missing 6 months of key House votes. Nobody knew where she was, apparently, but she was eventually found living at a retirement community. Texas Congresswoman Granger has been AWOL on the House floor for months. Her office claims that health challenges have made travel to Washington, quote, difficult. That's all they offered for an explanation. Meantime, her son telling local outlets that she's been dealing with, quote, dementia issues and has experienced a very rapid decline since moving into the retirement facility. The question here is, why are we just learning about this now? 81 years old. She voted as recently as July, Kennedy?
Yeah.
July.
Yeah.
And she wasn't in Washington, and nobody bothered to check to see where she was. Dementia doesn't happen overnight. This has been someone who's been suffering from this for a while. She does, and her family say that she has declined quite a bit since September, but she voted in July.
Yeah, so why is she still holding the office? You know, it's like, what does it take to remove someone? Because that's an abdication of responsibility, and the people in her district deserve to be represented in Congress. If she can't do it, and she clearly cannot, if her son is admitting that she has dementia issues, then she shouldn't be serving. Step aside. I mean, what is the removal process like? We hear about, the 25th Amendment for the president, but...
Yeah, you have to vote on it in the House. But if that case was made, that I'm sure everybody would vote for it. Problem is, yeah, she was well enough to show up at Congress for the unveiling of her portrait. But as we were talking about, Nicole and I were talking about, she didn't vote that day because I don't think she was necessarily capable of voting. So, yes, look, the media never did its job. Mm-hmm. Constituents, I think, were misled by looking at her Twitter feed because she's continuing to post. Who was doing that? I think this... Of all the ethics reports out there, this demands an ethics investigation because what was the staff doing? How were they responding to constituents?
How is that not elder abuse?
Well, how is that? That is so misleading to the constituents and the people that she represents in Texas.
First of all, talk about elder abuse, talk about misleading to the American public, because this is not our only elected official. Ever heard of Joe Biden? I mean, seriously. Joe Biden's mental decline has been of something that we've been talking about for a really long time. And Nicole, it's not just Joe Biden. It's Senator Mitch McConnell. It's Nancy Pelosi. Again, our president, who obviously has cognitive issues. Where do you draw the line? Because it's really irresponsible for these elected officials, right? But their families are condoning it, just like Jill Biden did for years and covered it up.
So it's obviously a very slippery slope what we're talking about here. Some people are saying call for term limits, which, that there's a valid argument for that in general, just to have normal turnover when it comes to our elected Congress. But then some people talk about, well, since we have a minimum age for presidency, maybe we should have a maximum age, which I actually don't agree with, because I think that, there's some sort of intelligence and experience comes with age. But it does come down to whether they are able to mentally and physically perform their job. And that goes beyond Congress. And what she has clearly demonstrated, the moment that they said that she has been struggling with dementia is the moment that she should have been taken out of her seat. Amen. Because she represents the American people. She was voted to be in there. It is a complete failure of her duty to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, the term limits are one thing, right? But like you said, you can't set a maximum age. And an 81-year-old could be very healthy, and then you could have another 81-year-old.
Well, you got Senator Grassley, who's like 90 and as spry as can be. I put him up against anybody. Yeah. But you had a Senator Feinstein who was pretty much incapacitated for a long period of time as well.
I mean, if you look at this, though, as an American who's voting for these people and you're relying on these people and you're trusting these people, what does it say to new people that are coming in? You cannot trust them if they can't make an educated and wise decision to pull themselves out when they're no longer capable of serving their country.
Well, and that's the key point here. And listen, I'll just say, as a Gen Zer, I'm actually pretty sympathetic towards term limits because I'd like to see some more representation in Congress. And I think it's been made very clear that people will not give up political power unless they are literally forced to. We wouldn't even need to have conversations about term limits if people didn't choose to become career politicians. They are supposed to be public civil servants. And that's the real problem with this story, is that Granger was supposed to be a representative for her constituents, who are real people with real needs. And for the past 6 months, they have not had an advocate in Washington. which is her sole responsibility. She deprived them of that right. She failed to do her responsibility. And I don't know who's to blame. I don't know if the family's to blame. I don't know if the staff is to blame. I don't really want to get into...
I think
all of the above.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
the victims here are the people, the constituents she was supposed to represent. Where do they go to get their voice back?
I don't know.
Two things, though.
George
Two things, though.
Santos, he's going to run for her seat.
Yeah, exactly.
Two things, though. The people in that, they have to get rid of these people. It's okay. I beat a 12-year incumbent Republican, okay, when I first ran for Congress. It's okay to vote somebody out. They have to also make these decisions and take some responsibility as well.
But they didn't know. They didn't know where she was
But
at.
they need to know. They need to go figure out.
They weren't trying to find out, it seems. They were just letting it happen because that's the mentality in Washington, that if you don't show up, it's okay.
If you don't show up at your job, you get a call from
Somebody
your
would
boss
notice
saying,
after
where
6
are you?
months.
So if she hasn't come to vote on something since July, why wasn't she getting a phone call? Where are you?
I think that facade was put up there, and it also shows that the national media is not doing her job. You go and look at her website. She's chairman emeritus of the Appropriations Committee. She is in charge of all discretionary spending in the House of Representatives. You wonder why we're in so much trouble? They have somebody who hasn't shown up at their job in the last 6 months. Elon wants to get them back to their desk. That person wasn't at their desk. The other thing is there needs to be term limits for the bureaucracy. Dr. Fauci should have never sat in that seat for 40-plus years. You get too comfortable. If you're going to do term limits, do them for the bureaucracy as well.
They get way too comfortable. That's why she thought it was okay to not show up to work for 6 months. If any of us did that, we'd be fired. A Pew Research poll from earlier this year found that a staggering 87% of Americans were in favor of term limits for Congress. 87%. Obviously, it's not just the Gen Zers. It's all of America. You put somebody in office, at some point, you need a new face. You need some fresh blood. Nancy Pelosi needs to walk off with her cane or crutch.
Mitch McConnell, it's painful to watch him sometimes when he has the moments of just complete
pure
absenteeism.
space.
Well, and Jason,
and Joe Biden.
You raised an interesting point about her seat on the Appropriations Committee, because where were her colleagues? Why didn't they say anything about this? Why did the media have to report it? Why has everyone just been completely silent on her whereabouts?
She's not the only one. I'm sorry, but Congressman Scott is on the Democratic side of the aisle. He is not able to fully function. That's my personal opinion.
And maybe they actually did know, but because the Republicans have such a slim majority, they didn't want to chance the fact that she might not have her seat. Like, there may be some deceit happening
here. But again,
people
you
very
answer to the American people.
They know. They know.
Yeah, and this is the problem, though.
Right.
You answer to the American people. You do not answer to the GOP party apparatus. You do what's best for the constituents first and foremost, always.
Well, that's not what the Biden administration, they knew for years of his cognitive decline, and they covered it up. And so that's the Washington we have been dealt.
Well, so here's a big deal. This is absolutely despicable. And let's talk about it on Azimuth podcast. I'm Barrett McNabb, and here we go. We have another politician that's been in her seat for such a long period of time, and she has a staff of 25 people. 25 people. I'm a small business owner, and I don't even have 25 employees, okay? So to put that in perspective, she has a staff of 25. There's a person that's dedicated to doing her Twitter feed. She has been absent and checked into a nursing home for the past 6 months. And she apparently has dementia, according to her son. Now, here's a big problem. CNN came out and said the reason that they had not gone ahead and investigated this is because they had a lack of resources. But they sure are covering everything Donald Trump. They sure are covering everything Kamala Harris. They sure are covering everything Joe Biden. And they're covering his vacation days, and they're covering this, and they're covering that. But here we have a very powerful woman who has a very powerful position on the Appropriations Committee, and she was not present at all, and no one bothered to check to see what was going on. Now, here's the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the decline has been noticed for the past 3 election cycles. That's 6 years. Not just the 6 months, but she has been having memory lapses for the past 6 years, and her friends and her family and her staff keep having her run. And honestly, this is elder abuse. It truly is. One of her colleagues Jonathan Strickland, who actually ran against her and brought this issue up, said nobody should be mad at Representative Kay Granger. 6 years ago, as an elected official who worked regularly with and around her, it was obvious she had serious memory issues. She had no idea what was going on for a while. Again, yet her friends, family, and staff lied to her and said, no, you should keep going. And this is the result. That obviously, a woman who was in huge decline starting 6 years ago, and her friends and families didn't want her to give up power, so they kept pushing for her to run. And she clearly did not have the mental faculties to do that. Now, Angelica Morabato said, wow, Representative Kay Granger hasn't voted on a bill in 6 months, has been living in a nursing home in secret. Records show, again, that she has that staff of 25 that I told you. If any of them knew, and it would be hard not to know, they are complicit and should be fired. And I couldn't agree more. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is, on the same scale as Joe Biden. It's on the same scale as Dianne Feinstein, the senator from California, who had a mini stroke, and she was in California in the hospital for such a long period of time. And she came back to Congress or the Senate, and staffers had to tell her what to say. There was, a procedural roll call vote, and all she had to say was yes or no. And instead of saying yes or no, she went into this speech, and one of her staffers had to lean forward and say, "Oh, just say no." And then no. I mean, she literally at that point in time was a puppet and just a shell of her former self. Now, her friends and family kept saying, you got to run, and she wound up dying in office. And that is just no way to go, because, people have talked, the Democrat side has talked about the accomplishments that she had. Fine. But nobody remembers those anymore. All they remember is this photograph of her coming back from having this medical procedure and medical issue that she had that took her out of action for a number of months, and she came back in a wheelchair, looking like this, trying to say that she is fully in control of all of her mental acuity, and that is just deceitful for everybody. And so obviously that did her a disservice. It did the nation a disservice. But back to Representative Kay Granger, she should have stepped down a long time ago. It's obviously a Republican district. It's in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's a Republican district. So having her, replaced by somebody or having a special election, more than likely a Republican still would have won that district. I mean, here she is for the past 6 years. It's been weekend at Bernie's for her and for Joe Biden, but for her and she's winning. So I mean, if she can win it, then somebody that is in full control of their mind should be able to win that district as well. So I don't really subscribe to, the Republicans had such a slim majority that they needed to make sure that there was enough Republicans in order to get stuff done. Obviously, she hasn't been voting, so they haven't been counting on her vote anyway. And the biggest issue here is the budget. Having the continuing resolution that took place right before Christmas, and it was a big fight. They were down a vote because of that, because she wasn't voting. So this was just a tragic story all around. You have people like Mitt Romney, who are leaving the U.S. Senate. And, he said it himself. It's time for the next generation of leaders to come into Washington, D.C. No, I don't necessarily agree with term limits. The Constitution doesn't have term limits. The Constitution does have term limits for the president. But the thing is if you're willing to run again, then you should be able to be voting. But the people should know and should vote out people that they don't want anymore. And it's okay to do that and replace them with another Republican. You have Joe Manchin that was a Democrat, and he changed to become an independent, and he said the same thing. He did not run for re-election. And it's okay. It's time for the next generation to come in, and it's good to have these new thoughts and ideas of the populace coming in and being able to, have longevity themselves and make sure that there's continuity of government. Dying in office just creates an abrupt stoppage of government. And, if you're really that old, honestly, 74 should be the cutoff for you to run. You should be done. You should be retiring anyway. But right now, Congress, both the House of Representatives, the Senate, and let's even go in the presidency is the world's most expensive nursing home. It truly is. And this needs to stop. We need to make sure that we have the next generation of leaders coming in. We have a lot of geopolitical issues that are on the horizon, and we need to make sure that we have a group of individuals that are the next generation that can look to and solve this problem. So thank you so much for listening into Azimuth Podcast. Please leave a comment below whether you think that she should have kept running or she should have retired 6 years ago, which is 3 election cycles. So let me know. And thanks so much for watching Azimuth Podcast, and please stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.